Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Pamela Pelletier, and I'm the VP for Activities. Thank you for making it through the rain and the labyrinth. I hope you take cookies for finding your way back from when you go back. I do want to let you all know that we are in this space only for 2 more months. We don't know where our new lecture space will be, but I can promise it won't be much worse than this. Unless, of course, we're at Pecos and the rain causes the electricity to cut out, and then that was kind of fun. Who all went to Pecos this summer? Besides the group back there that we hung out and played in the rain. Okay, well, you guys missed a wonderful, wonderful conference where the rainstorm built all day, and then finally it cut out power in the middle of the presentations, and just like a huge downpour. I can promise that our next location for our lecture series is going to be much better than that, okay? So I'm really excited to introduce tonight's speaker, Kurt Astroth. I actually met Kirk 2 years ago when we were in the Introduction to Dendrochronology class together at the Laboratory of Tree Ring Research. We were kind of in this odd boat of both being older students going back. Kurt is a former assistant dean in the cows department at the university and decided that I'm going to retire and go back and do what I really want to do, which is archaeology and focus on rock art. So we had a really great field time that summer. Like, we could not stop laughing. It was the best field season I think I've ever had, but we had a great time. So I'm really excited to hear his presentation tonight on his Petroglyph and Pictograph project. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to him. Thank you.
Yes, hi, good evening, and thanks for coming. I understand that the original speaker that was supposed to be here had to cancel at the last minute, and I think because Pamela knew me, she called me and said, "Is there something you can do on rock art?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I got a lot of stuff I can do on rock art. I love the topic, and I enjoy the opportunity to come and hopefully share some of my passion about rock imagery and help change some perceptions about people who are interested in rock art out there, because this project brought home for me how rock art research is really about history and science together, something that Steve Lexon talks about in his new book about the need for both an emphasis on history and as well as science. So this summer I got the opportunity to volunteer with Sacred Sites Research to document a site in central Wyoming in order to submit a nomination for the National Historic Register. It's on private land, as you'll see, and I jumped at the chance to be able to learn more from some of the leaders in the field about recording rock art. So this is some of the problem with rock art people. They can be they're often like a fringe, lunatic fringe in the archaeology field. They have somewhat of a jaded reputation because there's some people that bring a lot of mysticism in it. They think the rocks can speak and that they can interpret the messages that are being communicated by rocks. And there's people that believe that aliens actually put all this stuff here. And so when I know when I've dealt with some other people, rock art people have kind of a jaded reputation, and it's like, can't you get a real job doing something like ceramics or architecture or something like that? But I think one of my goals tonight, and I actually have 3 of them, is to first convince you that not all rock people or rock art people are crazy. Okay, so if you leave with that message, and there's probably nobody in there in this room that believes that, but I tell you, it's out there. You go to rock art conferences, you hear people talk about spirits coming out of the rocks and talking and conveying messages. It's kind of disappointing. But my other goal is also to help you understand some of the science behind rock art research. And a third goal is just to share with you some of this rock art that we found in this site in central Wyoming that not only is really unusual, it really is one of the most unusual rock art sites I've seen, but it has southwest connections. And that's why a couple of people said, why are you talking about Wyoming to a southwest audience? Well, there's actually, not only is the rock art really interesting, but there are some southwest connections, which I think raise some real questions about Fremont, who were the Fremont, where did the Fremont go, and some things like that. So this is also part of the problem. This is a sign. I guess I can't step away from this mic. This is a sign at Death Valley near Clare Springs, and it's a typical sign that creates some of the problems for us when we're trying to do rock art research. The second sentence is indicative. Indians living today deny any knowledge of their meaning. Well, that's just not true. It's just not true. And you can ask lots of native people about rock art images, and for some, they have some meaning. And so they have some connection. And Tatuvani Rock up in northern Arizona is a perfect example, this Hopi rock that has lots of clan symbols that's on the way to the Salt Trail in the Grand Canyon. So that's part of the problem with this sign, but the other is where it suggests that they could be anything, doodlings, ceremonial markings, family symbols, and the kicker is your guess is as good as any, which means that Joe Blow can have as valid interpretation about this rock art as any archaeologist or rock art specialist has, and that's just not true either. This whole idea that there are no experts anymore and that every opinion is valid just doesn't hold. So this is some of the challenges we confront when doing rock art and presenting rock art. With that, I want to start with something that my advisor and others on my graduate committee have encouraged me, is to come up with a different phrase than rock art. And there are problems with the whole concept of rock art. First of all, native people don't necessarily like the concept of rock art. They don't think it's descriptive. And this Western notion that it's art of some kind of decoration or adornment doesn't necessarily fit with their ideas about what these images on the rocks, both petroglyphs and pictographs, really mean. Another is that art kind of suggests that it's simply the response of individual creative artists who engage in unique expressions. But we know that native informants tell us that petroglyphs and pictographs have a lot of complex meaning, complex symbology. And finally, I like this statement from Wes Bernardini, where he said that both pictographs and petroglyphs suggest a diversity of practices, purposes, and meaning. So the concept of rock art doesn't really capture that. So I've been trying to change my language and encourage you to call it rock imagery or rock images. And that way it's a little more encompassing and doesn't suggest that it's merely an artistic expression that's not tied to culture. So here's a basic overview. What I hope to do tonight is give you a brief history about the Powder River Basin. It's a really rich, once I got up there and found out about the place, it's a really rich historical area. Share with you some of the previous archaeological work that's been done at this Hole in the Rock Ranch. I want to also, as I've said, that rock imagery is a critical part of the archaeological record. And one of the things that I really appreciated there this summer is that rock art was just another component of telling the entire archaeological story of that area. It went with ceramics, it went with hearths, it went with some caches that you'll see that were found up there with stick bundles and other things. So it's all part and parcel. And so wherever rock art exists, I think it needs to be included as a part of the archaeological record. And then the whole science of rock imagery recording. You can see these were all things that we've done. And I see I have a spelling mistake, XRF in there. The portable XRF, and you'll see examples of that. But all of these were things that we did this summer to try to get a complete picture of this site on the Middle Fork of the Powder River. So First of all, about the setting. So I've tried to outline there where, basically, the area where we were working. You can see the middle fork of the Powder River there next to Casey, Wyoming. So it's in the middle of Wyoming. It's the east side drainage for the Bighorn Mountains. So there's lots of rivers that come through there. There's even one called the Red River because it picks up all this red sandstone. And it's a gorgeous place. When you drive up there, you think you're in southern Utah. It's red sandstone, it's got buttes and mesas, it's got these incredible canyons. And we were invited up by Peter Wold and his wife Marla, who own a several 100,000-acre ranch in this area, and at least they appreciate the historical, cultural resources that are on their property. So they wanted to protect the rock art and have it documented and submitted for the National Register. As you'll see, they have a buffalo jump on their property. They have some historic old cabins. They have a number of things. And to our amazement, next to their ranch house, they have a 9-hole golf course that they built in this landscape. So it's a pretty incredible place. This is their ranch out in this area. You can see the middle fork of the Powder River there and some of the ranch buildings and some of this incredible country in the middle of Wyoming. I grew up in Utah and spent a fair amount of time in Wyoming and Colorado and Arizona, and I never knew that a place like this existed in central Wyoming with all this red sandstone and Utah-like geography. And this was the canyon that we were working in, Middle Fork Canyon, right below these cliffs that you can see. Are some of the major panels that we were investigating. An outstanding place to spend the summer. So a little bit of the history. There's been long-term occupation by native peoples of this whole area, and previous archaeological research found that there was an archaic present back to 2,500 years ago. I mentioned that they found hearths. They found buffalo remains at this buffalo jump, which is the slide or the picture at the upper right. It's a buffalo jump that's on that property. They found shell beads, although they were all freshwater shell beads. They found projectile points, there's obsidian, and they found ceramics, this corrugated pottery that's affiliated with the Fremont. And then more recently, they found a bark bundle about 250 years old and a stick cache also about 250 years old in some rock shelters. And it's also an area, as you'll see in a little bit, where two major trails converge. So there was a trail that went east-west and a trail that went north-south. And so native people were using this kind of as a gathering place, intersection where lots of things were going on. And it's rich in wildlife and water. And in this bottom slide, if you can see it, one day we went up and searched out these rock piles that mark the ancient trail from the Powder River Basin up over the Bighorn Mountains and over to Ten Sleep, which is a Nature Conservancy property that has this huge alcove full of other pictographs. So we knew that they were related, and it was only about 100 miles distance. So some of the more modern history, this whole valley was where the Dull Knife battle took place. Shortly after the defeat of Custer and his troops at the Little Bighorn, a lot of the Indians scattered, and this tribe went down to the Powder River Basin, and as this slide shows, it was promised to them and taken away twice in two different treaties. So after the Custer battle, they knew that there was going to be hell to pay, so this group moved down onto what's called the Red River, and shortly after that, they were attacked by government troops. The fighting was fairly intense but short, but it drove all these Indians into the Bighorn Mountains in the winter without their lodges, without a lot of their food, without a lot of clothing, and it was a pretty dire situation. They were hoping to link up with Crazy Horse, which they finally did in the spring, but by that time, all the Indians were so decimated by these attacks that then they surrendered, as this shows in 1877. This area too, if you know about Hole in the Wall, was where Butch Cassidy and his gang hung out. So it's a huge outlaw area, and it was the reason for Johnson County Wars. Some of you probably heard about the Johnson County Wars. And it was an incident where these big cattle barons wanted to drive out the small stock owners. So they sent in assassins to kill this guy, Nate Champion. They got him in his cabin and assassinated him, and then sent in this huge invasive force to wipe out the small stockholders and the rustlers, although it was questionable about who they were really after, if they were after more of the small stock owners than it was the rustlers. But in any case, it became such a big deal, the federal government had to send in troops to quell the thing. But the cattle barons were in league with the governor of the state, and so nothing happened to any of them. None were ever prosecuted for the murders that were committed. So an interesting part of that history. And then just the uniqueness of this Middle Fork of the Powder River. Like I said, it's an intersection of two major trails. There's a wide mixture of rock imagery there, the styles, because so many different groups used it as a meeting and ceremonial place, as you'll see. And some of the rock images there are so unusual, or they're not found anywhere else in the Plains states. There's some that aren't found anywhere else in Wyoming, and there's green bears, as you'll see, that are also not found anywhere else in the Central Plains. There's a lot that I could share with you about this site, but for tonight I tried to pick out just the 4 or 5 unique characteristics and show you some examples of those and give you some background to it. Here was our team. I mentioned we had the SHPO office from Wyoming involved, Sacred Sites Research. Any of you that have studied rock imagery in the past probably are familiar with Julie Francis's name, as well as Larry Lohendorf. They've done some outstanding work. Our GPS specialist was Mark Willis, the guy standing up with the beer in his hand. We had a geoarchaeologist who will talk about his work in a minute. We, of course, consulted ethnographic reports. We had the portable XRF to look at paint pigments. We had 2 artists that actually did some sketches, and you'll see some of their work here tonight, because sketches often tell you a lot more than photographs. And then I helped with the site recording. So there's 3 major areas along the Middle Fork on this rancher's property, and these go from upstream to downstream. It's interesting because, as I'll show you, and I put in the announcement for this, one of the unique things about this site is all the extensive hand stencils, and they're not hand prints. You probably are familiar with hand prints. If you've been to like Fremont Indian State Park, there's the Cave of 100 Hands, and there's all these painted hands that are put on there. These are hand stencils where we think they put the paint in their mouth and then sprayed it out of a hollow reed around their hand that sat on the rock. And that's how they created these hand stencils. The hand stencils are in the location on the far left and the far right. So they almost like bookend all the rest of the rock art, rock imagery that's at this site, where you can see the question mark and the number 4. Every day we had to drive down this long valley, cross the river a couple of times. There's this interesting formation here. It's Castle Rock. You can see it there in the distance. And when I got there, I wasn't sure what I'd be doing. I said I just volunteered because I want to learn how to record rock art sites. And Larry Lohendorf, the leader, says, well, tomorrow we're going to be hauling in the scaffolding, and we're going to have to hike that in and cross the river with it. And I went, what? Scaffolding? That sounds heavy. And they said, yeah, but that's the only way we can get high enough to see some of the rock art. So the very next day, here we are moving scaffolding, carrying it a piece at a time across this river so we can get up to examine the rock art on the cliff. So that's what it looked like when it was assembled. We had to do XRF, we had to do some digital photography. The artists were up there to do some sketching, but I never thought I'd be on a rock art project with scaffolding. Yeah, I got a question here. Yes, sorry, I shouldn't assume that everybody knows what that is. It's a portable X-ray fluorescence device. It's kind of a handheld device. You'll see a picture of it. It looks like a little gun. And you hold it next to a pigment for 90 to 120 seconds. 2 minutes is ideal, but it's often hard to stand up and hold something that still on pigment for that long. So Eric was doing 90 seconds on the pigment, and it basically analyzes what are the chemicals, what's the chemical component of these pigments. So we might find out where they came from. For instance, that green bear, it has a high quantity of copper in it, and we think that's what's giving it some of the green tint. So that's XRF. Thanks for the question. So this was Bill, our geoarchaeologist, and what he was doing is looking in this valley and taking cores of the river terraces to try to figure out another way to date the petroglyphs and pictographs in this canyon. If he could find out how old some of the terraces had been, or how long ago the terraces had been eroded, we can determine, in a relative sort of way, perhaps how old some of these rock art images are. What he found out is 3,000 years ago, the ground level was way up at the top of this canyon. And over that time, the terraces began to erode because of the stream, and the cliff that we were on with the scaffolding had only eroded out about 1,000 years ago. So it's dropped that much in 1,000 years that we now have to have scaffolding, but it helps us understand how some of that rock art was so high above our heads. And then, of course, we did the recording. We took GPS with a total station. You can see Mark with his little unit there. We're doing digital photographs, climbing up on the cliffs. I was doing all the site forms, recording detailed information. Any of you have worked on rock art projects, you probably know this whole thing, and everybody has a different form, but it was interesting for me to see what Wyoming used. So I told you I'd share 3 or 4 or 5 some of the most unique things about this area, and bear imagery is one of those. Larry and the other researchers believe this was a ceremonial site that had high importance for medicinal purposes, and part of that is the bear imagery. So here's a couple of the petroglyphs that we found. I'll start with the one on the left because it's the most interesting. That bear paw is 1/2 meter wide. So it's fairly significant. And you can see it's a little more deeply incised than this other one, the bear paw on the right. But look in the center of that bear paw, and there's a lizard. You see it? Well, the Cheyenne believe that lizards have medicinal value, and often umbilical cords were taken from a newborn and put inside a lizard effigy, and that was carried around for their entire life as a symbol of long life and prosperity. So the fact that there's this bear paw with a lizard in the center of it gives double significance for the ceremonial or medicinal purposes of this particular area. This site has more bear paws than any other site in Wyoming, and it's all over the cliffs. And then you can see this other one that's more lightly incised, seems to have 6 toes, but it's definitely bear claw. And then across the river, some of these will be a little hard to see, but I was hoping with this big screen that it would be visible to most of you. Across the stream, they found a new set of panels, and they named it the Bear Rider panel, which I'll explain in a minute. But over here on the left, you can see that that's a bear. The claws seem to indicate that it's definitely a bear, and then the snout, the teeth that are in there, and all of these bear images, which is typical of what's called a Timber Creek style, have the 2 eyes on the same side of the head, so you can see the eyes here. This other one is really interesting in that it's a bear that's like standing up. It's actually when the artist got a hold of it and could see the image much more completely than a camera, it's climbing a tree, and it has a person on its back with a big lance aimed at its head. So very interesting rock image, and that's why this whole panel is called Bear Rider, because this guy's riding a bear. And you'll see another example of that elsewhere in this presentation. This is the green bear panel, which was the reason for the scaffolding. The picture on the right is what you see without de-stretch or without any enhancements. I probably should, how many people know about de-stretch? About a third of the group. So de-stretch is a little app you can put on your phone, and it was invented by NASA scientists, and it stands for decorrelation stretch. And what it does is it's able to separate colors out from each other to bring out the contrast more. So de-stretch, for about $20, you can get it on your phone. It only works on pictographs, not petroglyphs, because it's looking at the colors and then separates them so that you can see them better. It almost does what the artists have done over here on the right. That's similar to what de-stretch would give you if you took a picture of that panel. But the artist version is much better. And we'll start with, there's a lot on here, and I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it's the most interesting panel there, so I wanted to explain some of it. Down in the lower left, you can see there's a bear. Is there anything unique about that bear? Yeah, long tail. You don't see bears too often with long tails. Well, we know it's a bear because of the snout, the ears, and the bear claw that's out in front. And it may be another green bear that's above him, but that one's so eroded we can't tell, and it's emerging from that crack. But it turns out that several Plains Indian groups have stories about bears with long tails. And Algonquin-speaking Indians, of which the Cheyenne are part, have a story that the otter was one day out ice fishing and was catching lots of fish. And the bear came along and said, "Hey, how is it that you're catching so many fish? I want to catch some fish too." And the otter said, "Well, just stick your tail in this hole and wait for a bite." So the bear did that and sat there and sat there. And he sat there for so long, the ice froze over his tail. And when he tried to get out, it pulled it off. It turns out Pueblo Indians also have stories about how the bear lost its tail. And there's a tale that one of their cultist heroes, Sun Arrow, was swallowed by this huge toad. And first the blue jay came and tried to get the Sun Arrow hero out of the toad's mouth, and he lost his tail. So that's why blue jays don't have extremely long tails. Then the bear came and tried to get the Sun hero out of there, but his tail came off too. And eventually it was the badger that got Sun hero out of the toad's mouth, but the bear is remembered for his valiant try by his short tail. So this bear with this long tail is interesting and suggests it's a mythical bear. And lending further to that story, many of you probably know about Devil's Tower and how one of the stories is that all of those weird columns, those basalt columns, were carved by a bear trying to get to the top. Well, this artist was commissioned by the Park Service at one time to do this painting, and it's been suggested by historians that he consulted with the Cheyenne Indians on how to depict this bear, and you'll notice this bear has a long tail, just like the one on our panel there. So long-tailed bears are part of this indigenous history. So if we look at some of the other images on here, I hope I have is there a pointer? Yeah. So here's this green bear we started with, his long tail. Let's look at these guys right now. There's a couple of anthropomorphs here, all of what's called a linear style, and that's very unique to this area of the country too, these long, thin, human-like figures, and they all have like a V crotch. They have down-pointing legs, and here these guys have kind of the hallelujah pose with their arms up in the air, versus this guy over here, which you can obviously see has an extremely long leg, longer than his entire body, and he's both white and tan in paint. And then they end up at these strange, whatever figures they are, with protuberance on them, and they're painted also in green. There's actually 6 of these, as you can see, these 3 in a line. There's a white one here, and then 2 red ones up here. This figure is also interesting because it resembles in some ways a fish if you're looking down from the top. And this kind of a tail is suggestive that it might be a fish, but then it's also got a human inside. And there's other cultures that show this kind of anthropomorphism and changeling status between human and other types of figures. The most interesting thing in this panel for me is this mask in the middle. And you can see that it's outlined in red. He or she's got a red, a white, a tan, and another red feather or horns on this mask. There was something else down here. It could have been a necklace. It was too eroded for us to see. And you can see the slit eyes and just the rest of that figure. There's been no other similar mask like this found anywhere else in the Great Plains. This is the only one so far. And what's interesting about it, I mentioned that there's potential southwest connections. So here's that picture of that mask from the Green Bear panel in Wyoming. And here are 2 similar masks from the Parsons book about the Tewa of New Mexico that have feathers on the headdresses, the eyes, and here's one more from New Mexico, a painted mask that has some, again, striking similarities. The Kiowa language is actually a Tanoan language, and Tanoan is a language that's spoken on the Rio Grande River in the pueblos there. So there is some thought that Fremont, well, I'll save that to the end where I have my map. One of the other panels, this cliff has a lot of rain and runoff, and off the top comes all this mud. And so these are just some examples of the mud flow that flows over the panels. Well, one day we were supposed to document what was called Panel 13. Larry Lohendorf comes up and says, yeah, there's not much on Panel 13, don't worry about it. Don't spend a lot of time recording it. There's not going to be much there for you to record. And so we started looking at it and had all this mud, but in a particular place, I saw 2 little round holes together. And I said, that's weird. That doesn't make sense. That's not natural. That looks man-made. And I looked further down below on the panel, and I could make out what looked to be like an M and a W. And I asked other people in the group, and they said, oh, that's graffiti. That's modern graffiti. Somebody carved their initials in there. I said, I'm not sure. That looks like some of the incising we've seen on some of the other panels we've been looking at. So I got out my paintbrush, and we use these big dry paintbrushes. We don't use water. Just start brushing off the mud, because this is real fine sandstone, and the stuff comes off pretty easily. And once we started brushing, we were amazed at what we found. Here, and again, these are really hard to see because of the light, and I've tried to enhance the one on the right with my computer, but here's those 2 holes, which were the eyes. As I started to brush this off, I could see there were ears up here, this long snout, and over here, those are the M and the W's, the teeth. They're right in the jaw where they're supposed to be. And then you can see these claws. The arms, I don't know what this is, and this almost looks like a turtle or something up there underneath his neck. But there's 2 distinct claws, one here and one right here. So after we started brushing that off, we found this huge bear. It's probably about 2 meters high. And of course, unfortunately, it has some graffiti on this bear image. I thought it was pretty fascinating. The other thing that's unique about this spot, and I mentioned it, is the hand stencils. There's Eric with the XRF machine trying to get a reading on some of the yellow paint that's around these handprints and arm prints. That's what makes this area unique too. Many times when you see hand stencils, you don't see the whole forearm, but in many of these sites, we have the same, or the whole full forearm. A woman by the name of Madeline Mackey did research here as a part of the Wyoming Field School in 2013, and she documented 78 hand stencils. And they range in age from, she said, like 12-year-old kids all the way up to adults. And like I said, they bookend this site. They're in two little side canyons that bookend the bear images. Here's some more. We had a lot of mud swallow nests, as you can tell there, so we had things to deal with. But again, you can see, particularly in the photo on the right, the long forearms that are captured as a part of these hand stencils. And occasionally you'd find just a single hand stencil on a wall, but it was always in one of those spots and often in association with other kinds of petroglyphs. And I didn't quite get all this image in here, but over here, that's the stencil of an atlatl. Yeah, very interesting on the canyon wall, and these are up really high. Again, some others, and I included this because look at this long forearm as a part of that hand. Just incredible, incredible stuff. There's also some proto-historic images. I thought I'd include those from Crow, Kiowa, Hidatsa. This image over on the right, if you can see, it's a teepee. You can see the teepee poles at the top, the whole shape of this at the bottom. That's, and again, very light in sizing, which seemed to be a characteristic of the time. And then this is an iron tip for a lance. And Larry knew, just because of the design that was pecked here, that it was iron rather than stone. Here's some other images. We found lots of buffalo heads, like the one in the center. There was this strange, there are lots of these around. I don't know if these were like ceremonial staffs, but it has like some fringe up at the top, a wide part here. First I thought it was an atlatl, but the feathers on it didn't make sense. And then these very odd anthropomorphs, again with their hands down, but they don't have V-necks. And I included this again. I'm glad we got a big screen so we can see this. As we looked really closely at the cliffs near that green bear panel, we found this light carving of 4 sweat lodges. And at the bottom, you can see all those scratches. We think that's to imitate the river, because this is right in front of the river on this cliff where these 4 sweat lodges were drawn in, superimposed over something else that had used red dye, but we don't know. There wasn't enough of that left to determine what it was. Yeah, and then here towards the end, there's a lot of shield warrior figures there. The plains, any of you that have looked at other places in the States for rock imagery will know that shield warriors are very common up on the plains. So there's 2 common styles that have been identified here, although there are 7 shield warrior styles that people have identified at this spot. The most prevalent are this castle garden style, which tend to be polychrome. They don't have extensive adornment on the heads. They usually don't have weapons associated with it. And first the surface is abraded, and then the image is incised on it. That's what kind of characterizes castle garden style. Timber Creek style is a little different. It has much more animated heads. There's usually anthropomorphs or bears on the shields, like this one. And they usually have some sort of a weapon or something with them. So I wanted to show you just one particular, well, this is some examples of the shield warriors that are in the middle fork on the canyon, on the rocks. But this is a particular panel. I just wanted to spend some time on the left and the right side, because This side is considered to be examples of the Castle Garden, and these are the Timber Creek ones. And we'll look at a close-up of those real quick. So this is that far left side of the panel. Again, the characteristic of these is they're polychrome, so many different colors. They're braided and then etched in around there. There's usually some sort of a geometric design. So using this natural crack in the rock here, they've divided this shield into like quadrants. This one, of course, has lots of purple paint at the top and in the middle. And this one seems to have a figure with some sort of feathers, but this spiky hair. Have no idea what that little thing is. And on the right side of the panel are these more recent Timber Creek ones. And the reason they're Timber Creek is they have headless bears in the center of both of these shields. So we know they're bears because of the claws, like right here, the shapes of them, again, the claws. And this guy seems to have a feather or a fan or something behind him, but look at this lance point that's tipped in red next to this shield figure. So Timber Creek tends to have weapons associated with them. They all have spiky hair, whatever that's about, and then animals, typically bears on the shields. But notice this figure over here. I mentioned that bear rider panel that had that bear with a guy on his back riding. Here's that same image repeated again, and it's a V-necked anthropomorph, which is a particular style there in the plains. And just in case you think that they're just in central Wyoming, these are two shield-bearing warriors I found in a book about Navajo rock art. So shield-bearing warriors are not unknown here in Arizona, and were part of some of the rock art images left behind on rocks by Navajo. And you can see, like with this one, it's got a geometric pattern in the middle of the shield. It's got some arms with fingers, got a head with horns that looks very much like some of those others, but doesn't have spiky hair. So shield warriors were something that were known clear down here as well as very common on the plains. Tobacco imagery was also really important there, and in Crow, the symbol for a star is also the symbol for a tobacco seed, because they believe that tobacco came from the skies, from falling stars that were then planted and grew into plants. And I want you to remember this picture, particularly of this T shape in the middle of this tobacco pod. This is the Native American native tobacco that grows in lots of places, and we found these plants in front of the rock art panels that we were recording. And how they recorded that, again, I outlined this here. Look at all those little plus signs. Those are to represent tobacco. And this is supposed to represent a tobacco plant. And you'll see an example of that here from an artist's sketch. This is off of another panel, so here's our little plus signs again, indicating tobacco seeds, and these are the results of tobacco seeds growing into plants. There's that plus sign, and there's the foliage of the tobacco plant. So tobacco imagery, again, for a ceremonial site, we have medicinal things like bears, lizards, tobacco. And finally, Fremont images. So this is what used to be known as the extent of, one map of the extent of the Fremont culture. Their rock art, or rock imagery is typified by trapezoidal bodies. They usually have arms, legs, and fingers. Necklaces is a big distinguishing characteristic of Fremont, usually head ornaments, and they have horns, sometimes shields. But you can see where in this map, where we were at KC is about right here. This is the Bighorn Mountains. So we were shocked one day. We were going over to that bear rider panel, and I had my really good camera with me, and somebody said, aim your camera up on this cliff real high. It looks like there's an image up there. And I got my camera out and looked through it, and I said, oh my God, that's a Fremont image. What is it doing here? And so Mark, because he's the tech guy, he goes and gets his technical equipment. He has these great handles that he can mount his camera on, and it's coordinated with a flash. So he can get all that stuff up there at the same time. This was too far for us to disassemble. I know people are saying, why don't you take the scaffolding over there? That was too far, and we weren't going to take it down and reset it up just for these Fremont figures. But he used his wizardry to get his camera up there and do a flash, and this is what we found. Very interesting image in that here this guy's got a necklace, definite eyes and mouth. You can see there's been some strong abrading here that wiped out his hand. There's a hand over here, not quite a trapezoidal body and lacking the feet, but definitely some weird head ornamentation. And if you look closer over here, I don't know what this is coming down next to his head. There's not enough of it left, but you can see much clearer what this image looked like. And it looks like it's reversed because of the flash, so it's actually engraved into the rock. But I want to put this up too. Notice over here, there's 4 plus marks. The tobacco imagery appears even on this panel. Next to that one, right next to it on a highly eroded site, is this other Fremont-style image. And we had to have the artists recreate this because that's as good a picture as we could get on the left side. But this very eroded second figure next to that initial one. This is what Fremont figures typically look like in southern Utah. This one's from Green River area. You can see the hands, trapezoidal body. There's no feet. There's head ornamentation. Same with this guy. He's on the same panel. These guys in a different spot down near Blanding and Bluff with the ear bobs. Same with this. This is along the San Juan River. That's probably a famous one that lots of people have seen because, oh no, this is up at Vernal, sorry. The McConkey Ranch, because it's got this severed head that this guy is carrying in his hands. So that's a typical Fremont image. But to find these up in central Wyoming is rare. And it's the furthest east any Fremont images have ever been found. So like Steve Lexon says, maybe a little thought experiment. Maybe when lots of other people were leaving the Four Corners area and heading to the Rio Grande, maybe the Fremont headed northwest, because we find evidence of them in northwest Colorado, certainly all the way up into Wyoming, and now much further up into Wyoming, where Fremont pottery has been found, points have been found, now these rock images that have been found. So we were out there for considerable time, and Larry gave us a day off. And what do archaeologists do on their day off? Go to another site. So up the canyon, we decided to go find this rock shelter we had heard about. And this is the canyon of the Middle Fork of the Powder River. Tremendous landscape. You can tell how deep that canyon is. And down in that canyon, which is down in the lower corner of the first picture on the left, is this outlaw cave that's on the right here. So Butch Cassidy and his guys hung out down in this really remote canyon. The neat thing is, up at the top is this Sweem-Taylor rock shelter. This is a picture from inside the rock shelter looking out on the landscape, and there's Amanda pointing up to one of the shield-bearing warrior figures. It's got the distinctive V-neck, as you can tell. And here's a close-up with the one on the right is the D-stretch image of that. But also in the cave are these charcoal images as well, scratched onto the ceiling. So some very interesting stuff up there. It was good to go and see some other rock art in the area. So really, in conclusion, I was excited to be able to share some of this stuff with even this Southwest audience because it's some of the most unique and rare petroglyphs and pictographs on the plains. It's had thousands of years of use in this area. It's likely a ceremonial site as well as a meeting place because of the trails that converge there and the trail markers we could find. And I think it begins to suggest some new ideas about the expanse of the Fremont culture. It has obvious links to other sites. We went to Ten Sleep Alcove to compare the pictographs there, particularly the tobacco imagery, and it's also got links with these shield-bearing warrior figures to the Medicine Lodge site, both of which are only about 100 to 150 miles away from this Middle Fork area. And obviously, nominating it for the Historic Register is going to help keep the place preserved and recorded as it should be because of its unique collection of rock imagery. So some acknowledgements. These are all the people that helped me. Obviously, I wasn't in charge of this project, but I called Larry when I was asked to do a presentation here. I called Larry and said, can I share what we did this summer and some of the pictures I took? And he said, sure, that would be great. Want more people to know about this and see some of these Southwest connections with the mask, with the Fremont figures, with the shield-bearing warriors. So it was a great experience. Loved it. It's kind of archaeology I want to do. And end on this note. Yeah. Thanks very much. Be happy to take any questions if there are any.
What was the name of the ranch owner?
Peter Wold, W-O-L-D.
And have they been the owner forever, or is it a person?
For quite a while, they're Texas oil money, so that's why I can build a 9-hole golf course, I guess, on his place. His father was actually a senator from Wyoming, John Wold, and he's the guy that had the ranch initially.
Is this an old bass sheep farm by chance?
I'm sorry?
An old bass sheep farm?
Maybe. It's hard to tell. You know, they run mainly cattle up there and buffalo. They have some buffalo on the place because we had buffalo burgers the night he had us over to play golf. So I don't know. It could have been sheep herders, but I don't know. That Johnson County War was more all about cattle than it was about sheep. Anything else? Everybody want to go visit that place now? The Green Bear? Yeah. Well, thanks for coming out on a rainy night. Oh, there is a question over here. Sorry.
Oh, well, I was curious. So the crosses, at least in northwestern New Mexico and Navajo rock art, those are interpreted as stars. They're often as stars. So where does the tobacco?
Well, and you may have come in after I said this, but in Crow, they believe that stars are, those things are stars, but stars actually fell to the ground and turned into tobacco. So the image for a star and tobacco is exactly the same. Yeah. Yeah. All right, well, thanks very much. Stay dry.